Hey, Tatooine Sons family, this is David. We're trying something new for the next few weeks. We realize that we discuss a lot of different topics on each episode. And sometimes we include, well, let's just be honest, every time we discuss a topic, we include big spoilers. And so lots of you have mentioned to us in the past that you've had to skip episodes or wait to listen to episodes until you've watched a particular movie or TV series that we discuss in that show. And we don't want you to miss out on all of the other conversations on the show because you're worried about being spoiled in just one segment of it. So what we're doing is we are releasing each of our main topics in smaller individual sized episodes that last, in most cases about 10 to 15 minutes each. And today's episode is the discussion that Samuel the Hutt led on our big episode about Shuri's faith journey in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. It's a pretty classic Tatooine Sons take on the subject and one that you probably won't hear anyone else. Enjoy.
Before we get into the meat of this discussion, let's get y'all's ratings of this movie on a scale of 1 to 10 3D printed heart-shaped herbs.
Interesting.
Nathan?
Never thought I'd see a 3D printer used that way.
Yeah, I didn't either, but here
it is
we
pretty
are.
cool. So,
gosh, I mean, I've seen it twice now.
yeah, we both have. Yeah, Sam hasn't had to.
y'all are gonna
Sam
have
had
a
to study
different
for a
aspect.
test.
Yeah,
I'm not happy
You'll
about
have to go
it
see
either.
it sometime soon again, which means that I'll just go see
It'll
it
be
sometime soon.
Christmas
So it's
time by then.
Seriously.
Yeah.
right. But gosh, I mean, I loved the length of this movie as well. I loved how they took time. Apparently, there's a longer cut of it that was just like
Release the long cut.
the director's cut that was just like Ryan Coogler was just talking about it. So
Release
yeah, give
the
that to me.
Coogler cut.
Release the Coogler cut, yes. But I don't. I'd an 8. Even though there wasn't much wrong with it, I feel like a couple points just kind of fell flat. I feel like some of the Talokans just fell a little off.
Yeah.
Not Namor, but just some of the Talokans.
Yeah.
The scene where Shuri's visiting Talokan, that just feels a little off.
That I
Yeah.
fell asleep the first time,
did,
just a
and
few
you almost
minutes,
fell asleep
and
again.
I almost fell
When
asleep
I
the
think
second
back to the
time.
It's
movie,
just-
that's the one scene that I'm like, I
off
could have
about-
done
yeah,
without that.
I mean, when she goes into the suit and visits the city, I mean, the rest of it, her being
So for us, this is
Right.
the Canto Bite sequence.
Yeah.
You just can do
Yeah, I
without.
guess.
it-
I mean, not that it was like
No.
horrible and ruined the movie.
It did play later into the movie, and it's good. I mean, it was necessary. It just felt a little off.
Okay.
But yeah.
I would go. I'm going to give it oh my gosh, I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think that I've in how many MCU movies have there been? 30 now.
Jeez, I don't know.
There've been a lot.
Let's just guess. It's roughly about 30.
I think like 27 or something.
Yeah, roughly almost 30 movies with it. This was the absolute perfect opening to this movie.
That don't sound right.
What?
It says Marvel movies in order. How to watch all 39 MCU movies.
No.
And
Maybe
series
including
and
series and
Okay.
series.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
I was like, no.
So back to my point. I think it was the absolute perfect opening to this movie and the absolute perfect close
Right.
to this movie. And there was a lot of really amazing things that happened in the middle. I would probably put everything in the middle at like a 7. But the opening and the closing were so phenomenal that it elevates the whole show,
100%,
or the whole movie way up to almost. I mean, those were a 10 on both ends of it. So
Yeah, I mean, you about perfectly summed up my thoughts on it. I was going to give it an 8.5 as well, just because there were moments in the show or in the movie and things that it dealt with and scenes that happened that elevated the whole. Not that there was anything that was like bad about it, but without those scenes, it would have fell within.
it would have been like that was a fun MCU.
It would have
movie.
felt like every other MCU
Right.
movie at this point. But it had those moments to really elevate it. And, an 8.5 is almost a little lower than I'd probably, maybe thinking it. I got to go see it again, though. But yeah, let's get into the actual discussion. So, first off, the movie, well, I mean, there's this idea that Shuri is like praying to this deity that she doesn't believe in. It's sort of like a last resort, right? She's a scientist. Her faith has always just kind of been a cultural thing. It's like, yeah, it's just what you do around here. But she never really had any real genuine faith into it, but she still feels like this need to pray to this deity in hopes that T'Challa won't die, right? But what do you guys think about them opening the movie with this very moment?
I feel like it was a necessary way to open it, but it was difficult. I mean, it started and you just are sitting there and right along with Shuri, you just feel helpless because we all know the outcome of what's going to happen. And she even knew probably what was going to happen at that point. And it just was like, it was hard to watch. It was definitely difficult. And just, you related to Shuri in this moment because you knew what she was going through.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, it's the perfect opening to this movie. And that opening line for me, watching it as a person of faith, but also as someone who's lived a lot more life than you two and have prayed prayers like that. This reminded me a lot of prayers I prayed all the way back 17, almost 18 years ago now for my father. And prayers of just absolute desperation. And God, if you're there, if you hear me, please heal him. And so that opening line just really grabbed me with this because I've been there and I've felt that. And I've had those moments where I don't know if I really believe, but I'm still going to pray with it. And so I also think that it was really genius on behalf of everyone that was involved, Ryan Coogler and everyone involved in writing this story, we had always kind of predicted that T'Challa was going to die in some big battle at the opening.
Right. That's what we thought. Yeah.
For them to make this a disease, an illness of some sort, makes the reality of Chadwick Boseman's loss real in this story. And it also makes it so, yes, he's a superhero with supernatural abilities and supernatural strength, and yet he's still mortal. And something as simple as a disease, it makes it so relatable because, I mean, BB Nate, you and I right now are wearing, Avs Stanley Cup champion stuff. Peter McNabb, the long time from the very beginning of since 1996, he's been the color guy for the TV broadcast, and he died of cancer just a couple of weeks ago. And my father died of cancer. People we know die of cancer all the time. Kevin Conroy just passed from cancer, and so it makes that moment so relatable for everybody. And I think that it was brilliant.
Yeah, and in doing so, we're mourning in almost the exact same way.
Absolutely.
That everybody else in the film is, obviously not to the same extent. I mean, Shuri was his sister and all that.
Yeah, and not even as to the extent of the actors and the people involved.
But we can better relate to it.
Absolutely. And again, it helps us relate because we have all experienced that. A superhero
in some way.
Battling another superhero and being killed through that. We don't relate to that, but somebody passing from a disease and that hopelessness that Shuri feels, like I can't do anything, and I'm trying so desperately to find some kind of solution, and I can't, and all I can do is just pray to a deity I don't even know if I believe in to try to heal him. That's something that everyone watching this movie, I think, can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, they've got all the most advanced technology and medicine in the world, and it still didn't fix it. Yeah. But, when T'Challa eventually does pass, Shuri kind of sees that as a confirmation of what she already believed. I don't know if she ever explicitly stated it, but there is no God. I mean, she obviously didn't really believe in it very much before, and then her desperate prayer fell on deaf ears. So she ends up just disconnecting from the mourning process. That's what Ramonda was talking to her about and trying to get her to finally let go. And she gives up on creating that synthetic version of the heart-shaped herb that we saw at the beginning, even though her mom still pushes her to do it. She's kind of just lost any of her purpose, right? She puts her efforts into creating like a substitute protector called the Midnight Angel, which looked cool. Don't get me wrong. But that wasn't her mission, her goal. But Nate, do you kind of see any similarities between this and Matt in Daredevil?
Definitely. I mean, especially season 3 Daredevil, after Elektra dies and all of that, he just lost his faith and was like, there's no point. I mean, so his only goal was to enact vengeance or just not live. And so, I mean, Elektra died, Kingpin got out, crime was rampant. I mean, everything was just gone. And so, I mean, there were whole moments, especially in that first episode of season 3 of Daredevil, when he suits up again and he goes out and tries to fight those people, and then he eventually just is like wanting them to kill him,
Right.
And he says, I'm sorry, God, and that's it. And but he still is alive, and he's like, he won't even let me die. And it's horrible. But I definitely see similarities between Shuri. She just kind of focused on, like what you said, just building that Midnight Angel and her work and science and all that stuff, just to keep her mind off of something. But when she ever encountered, like she said, whenever she thought too long about her brother, she wanted to burn the world and everyone in it. And so it was difficult.
I think that that we one of the things that I find is fascinating about this part of this film and this segment, this section of the story here, is we consider tests of faith, when we talk about that phrase, a testing of our faith or whatever, as being like testing us, like going out and taking a risk towards something. We think of that. I think of, a step of faith, right? I think of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, where he has to step,
something you're in
a
control
step of faith, and you're believing in something that you can't see, but you step out anyway.
You take the action.
And this is a different type of a step of faith, or a test of faith. This is believing when you don't even know why you're believing anymore. And she struggles with this. She kind of gives up on this because she doesn't see any purpose in any of it. And she doesn't believe in all of the things that make Wakanda, in this story. And I find that, again, very relatable for when we go through struggles and things that happen in our lives that we can't explain, or that hurt so much, like this hurts her, this character. We want to give up and just kind of move on and not focus on it anymore, and walk away from our who we are and that kind of thing. So
yeah. Then later on in the movie, Ramonda is killed by Namor, and once again Shuri is consumed with creating a synthetic version of the heart-shaped herb, right? Like how she was when T'Challa died. But this time it's so she can avenge, not protect. And so when she eventually does take the heart-shaped herb, instead of meeting her mother in the ancestral plane, she meets Killmonger. He exposed.
Just real quick though, what was your reaction? BB,
I was shocked
when they come around there and you see Michael B. Jordan sitting.
I was just like, no way. I'm like, I didn't expect it at all, because I didn't think he would even show up in this movie. But it makes sense. It really does. It makes sense why he was in this.
I don't think there were any rumors.
No,
he was
nobody
saw
that at all whatsoever. I mean, how could he? He was dead. We thought that was it. We didn't think he could show up in the ancestral plane. But as he's talking to Shuri, he exposes the vengeance and hatred within her. Right? She's trying to avenge her mother's death in the exact same way he's trying to avenge his father's. Her motivation for becoming the Black Panther is ultimately the same as Killmonger's. So in the end, she kind of fails to accept that the eternal ancestral plane is true, because it wasn't what she expected. It wasn't what she was always told.
Yeah, she comes back and she's like, it didn't work.
Right.
She just denies it, because why would that?
It was easier to deny it than accept the actual truth
but she knew
was
it was true.
Now, this may just be a misunderstanding on my part, but why did she meet Killmonger and not her mother?
Because if you watch the scene, he says, he's like, you chose me. And she ultimately did, because she wasn't there she wanted to meet her mother, see her mother again, or she wanted to see T'Challa again. But ultimately, in her heart, she was aligning with Killmonger and what his mission was. And so he showed up and he knew it. And so she was wanting vengeance at that point. And I mean, Killmonger knows all about that. He ultimately did create vengeance. And so there was many times when we saw it later in the movie and everything, that we saw Shuri just becoming like Killmonger. I mean,
well, even the costume,
her suit is like a mix.
Is a mix of T'Challa and Killmonger's.
Which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it. BB Nate, when you said that she, this is her choosing. What he said is true, and her choosing vengeance, her choosing revenge. She's not in the right.
She's not trying to be.
She's not in the right spirit at this moment to interact with T'Challa in the story, or. Obviously, she couldn't have interacted with T'Challa in the movie, but that character would not have been able to show up in the ancestral plane. And even her mother, Ramonda, who she's reaching out to as she takes the herb,
right,
asking to meet with her, that's not the place that she's in. She's got to address this darkness that's within her. Her motivation for becoming the Black Panther is exposed when she comes around, and I don't think she even understands it at that point.
Right.
I think that she's still trying to fool herself into thinking she's doing this for the right reason. But then when she has this conversation with Killmonger, then it's like, well, she ends up embracing it. We find out later. Right. She embraces exactly what Killmonger tells her to do. So,
and then in the moment when her vengeance is about to be, fulfilled, her mother speaks to her from the ancestral plane with a pretty quick, simple message. Was it remember who you are or show him who you are? Because I thought,
him.
Was it? Okay. It was show him who you are, or show him who you really are, something like that, right? As she's about to strike that killing blow on Namor. But there's an interesting question to consider with that. When did Shuri forget who she was? Was it when she chose vengeance? Was it when she lost her faith at the beginning of the movie, or was it even before the movie began? Was this a losing battle from the start?
I think it was more when Ramonda died, because she was accepting and willing to help Namor when she was at Talocan. And she was listening and wanting to help, but right as he killed Ramonda, her mother, she just thought there was no point anymore. And so right at that point, she decided that Namor needed to die, because, an eye for an eye is what she was thinking. And so she just, right at that moment, and you saw it click too, she just kind of went into a path of just vengeance, just wanting to satisfy what she thinks her mother would have wanted at that point.
No, it's not what her mother would have wanted. It's what she wanted.
It's what she thought her mother would have wanted.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. And I kind of, from my perspective, feel like, how do I say this? Because it's going to come across wrong, and then I'll have to kind of clarify it. I feel like she lost the battle before the movie even started. I think that she did not have a firm faith. I think that she had put all of her faith and trust in herself, and in her abilities, and in her understanding of science,
and her brother,
and all of the wrong things she had put her faith in, and all of those things in that first 90 seconds of this movie are just completely exposed as being false. Okay, yeah. So she's trusting in her own abilities to replicate the heart-shaped herb in order to save her brother. Herb-shaped heart. Yeah, a heart-shaped herb. I love how they say herb.
They really announce the H.
Yeah, they do. I think she's trying to do that. That doesn't work. So her faith and trust in herself and in science is eliminated. And then T'Challa dies, and her faith and trust in her brother as Black Panther is ripped from her. And then you go back to the opening line again, and she's putting her faith and trust in a deity. But I think that for me, this exposes a false deity in her mind. He can't save. And I think that it kind of goes against what I talked about before, where, we all go through this battle at some point in our lives with trust and faith. But I do think that there's an element of that as well. What I think that the story does throughout is it also shows that this testing of her faith allows her to come through on the other end stronger in her belief. But I think that she lost the battle before it even started.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that was when you said she didn't have a good foundation to start with is what I was thinking. So yeah. Well, Wakanda Forever has quickly cemented itself as one of my favorite movies in the MCU. Not because it was super cool or had tons of fan service, although there were some cool moments. It's because it dealt with some deep and real themes that we all experience in a great way.
Yeah. We start every full episode explaining that pop culture is the mythology of this generation that speaks to something written on our souls. And Shuri's story in Wakanda Forever is a perfect example of this. All of us have been touched by the death of someone we love. And it's so hard to go through. And lots of times it causes us to question everything we believe in and even lose ourselves in the process. And this film, I think, hits even harder because everyone involved in it was dealing with this in a real world way because of the loss of Chadwick Boseman. Thank you for checking out this short segment from our full Tatooine Sons episode this week. I really do hope you check out the rest of the episode where we discussed Kino Loy's powerful speech from Andor episode 10, One Way Out, and the legacy of Kevin Conroy in the Batman animated series. And then be sure to follow us on all of our socials at Tatooine Sons. That's SONS with that. And as always,
may the force be with you.